Good afternoon, everybody. I'm delighted to be the moderator for today's session, Building Canada's Biomanufacturing Capacity and Ecosystem Approach Fit for Purpose. I'd like to start by acknowledging that I'm joining you today from the traditional territories of the Musqueam, Squamish, and Tsleil-Waututh peoples in Vancouver. And it is my pleasure to moderate this panel, esteemed panel, which includes Drs. John Bell, Lakshmi Krishnan, John Lewis, and Jennifer Quizzi. Now I'm going to start with a few remarks, introductory remarks, before I bring the panel in. So let me first slide, please, by putting up the life science ecosystem slide in a very simplistic and high level so that you can all be reminded what a life science ecosystem should look like in its basic fundamentals. We have two parts to it, the innovation and invention side of things, the very early stage, great science that happens, wonderful discovery out of our academic and research institutions, and then supported by good, solid infrastructure that supports innovation and wonderful talent, both homegrown and talent that's come into Canada to work with us. Now, Canada is one of the leading countries amongst the top 5 in OECD when it comes to discovery and innovation. Then we look at the other side, which is the value creation, where great science is then translated by organizations like BioCanRx and others, other NCEs and other organizations that do translation work and enable companies to take these technologies that are validated and spin out and build SMEs. And of course, we're very good at doing that in Canada too, and have been very successful. What we haven't been as good at in the past is anchoring companies here. And why is it important to anchor companies? Well, that's where the real value creation is once you have companies anchored that are creating jobs and building new products and pipelines to export all over the world, great new therapies and treatments. Public-private partnerships are key to doing this successfully. And while we don't have time to talk about the ecosystem here, it's important to remember that it's not one part of this innovation ecosystem that makes things work. We need to nurture and nourish the entire ecosystem. So the value comes from exits, IPOs, M&As, or just organically grown companies. But whichever way the exit goes, we want to keep those companies in Canada and grow them here. And a big component to that is being able to have robust manufacturing. So it's very important that we build and strengthen our biomanufacturing capacity here in Canada. Next slide, please. If we look at some of the companies that have recently been in the news and have been doing extremely well, these are all Canadian entities. Aren't we lucky that these companies were already baking and we had these irons in the oven? Imagine if we were starting when the pandemic came in trying to build these platforms and technologies. So this is why it is important to fund and nourish the entire ecosystem so that we are able to build and respond quickly when the time comes for us to do that. There are significant investments that have been made in these companies, and the government has put in a lot of money at scale in companies like Accelera, 176 million, Medicago, 173 million, Precision, 20 million, and Entos, 9.2 million, and so on and so forth. Lots of investment has gone in since the pandemic. So unfortunately, it took a pandemic to kind of give us a boost. But what we want to ensure is that we build robust biomanufacturing capacity in Canada that is here to stay, that builds sustainability and resilience. So with that, I want to now bring in the panel, and I want to first introduce Dr. John Bell, who will introduce himself actually and give us some opening remarks. John, over to you.
Great, thanks, Karima. Yeah, I am John Bell. I'm a PhD scientist in Ottawa. I'm also the scientific director of BioCanadaX, which is sponsoring this session today. I trained as a PhD scientist, so as my mom used to say, I'm not a real doctor, I'm a mouse doctor. And I trained in Ottawa for a while, in the UK for a while, in London as a postdoc fellow. Came back to Canada, had a lab at McGill, and then finally I moved to Ottawa. And I've been working in these area of cancer biotherapeutics for about 30 years now, trying to develop novel approaches for the treatment of cancer. And relevant to today's discussion, to advance my discoveries, I co-founded two companies, one called Generex Biotherapeutics, another one called Turnstone Biologics, which are developing some of our discoveries and getting them to the clinics so we can hopefully use them to treat patients and hopefully commercialize them later on. So in that respect, I've learned a lot about what it takes to get a company going and what are the challenges to get a company going in Canada. The other thing to make this happen is I started a manufacturing facility here at the Ottawa Hospital. I'm going to let Jen Quizzy speak more about that. She's now running the show there. But really, it was clear to us that we needed to have our own manufacturing capacity in order to develop our therapeutics. And so I think today my comments will be given from that perspective.
Lakshmi, could you go next, please?
Thank you, Karima. It's really a great pleasure to be on this panel today and to talk about this very important topic about, enabling biomanufacturing ecosystem in Canada. My name is Lakshmi Krishnan. I am the Director General for Human Health Therapeutics, one of the largest research centers at the National Research Council. And we are the largest R&D group in Canada that's focused on de-risking and accelerating the advancement of biologics and biologic medicines, whether there's a vaccines or antibodies. And in that process, one of the most critical pieces of what we do is enabling the manufacturing or manufacturing feasibility of those molecules. So I think this became one of the most important aspects that was very evident early on in the pandemic as to how we could support many companies. And right in the start of the pandemic in March, we started pivoting towards this aspect of de-risking and helping entities grow and develop their molecules towards successful manufacturing ready to enter the clinics. What we also really became evident is the gaps in biomanufacturing. So that is what I will be, I think, maybe focusing on of some of what we have invested to bring up those capacities, but more importantly, the biomanufacturing science and feasibility aspects, both infrastructure and value creation that Karima spoke about, that is going to be absolutely essential to ensure the resilience for the future. So that's what I think I'll bring my perspective about. And having trained as a vaccinologist, as a bench scientist, and over the years worked with many different products and vaccines, and always witnessing the valley of death, I think this would be a very interesting conversation to see how we can prevent that in the future and enable that in Canada to bring the stickiness factor to Canada.
Thank you, Lakshmi. John Lewis, over to you.
Sarah, thank you so much. Yeah, good afternoon, everybody. My name is John Lewis. I'm the CEO of a Canadian company called Entos Pharmaceuticals, and also a professor of oncology cancer at the University of Alberta in Edmonton, Alberta, Canada. My story is somewhat like John's. In fact, I've admired John for a long time. I sort of regard him as a mentor. He was a trailblazer in Canada for being an academic scientist, but also pushing translation and manufacturing. And so my background, I have a PhD in biochemistry, did some training in San Diego in nanotechnology, and then came back to Canada to start my first biotech company in 2005. had the opportunity to meet several other great Canadian scientists, one of which we worked together to create Entos Pharmaceuticals in 2016. Now, in my research life, I've been passionate for many years about cancer, namely, why do cancers spread? And because the spreading of cancer kills the majority of people who get cancer, now how can we block it? And so actually developed Entos's core technology with that in mind, hoping to address or inhibit specific genes that cause cancer. And so in so doing, our goal is to develop a non-toxic gene delivery approach that could be used for cancer. And in 2016, we realized it was a very broadly applicable system, and we decided to launch Entos Pharmaceuticals. Fast forward today, we have a non-viral gene delivery platform, similar concept to Pfizer and Moderna's vaccine, actually, that can deliver both RNA medicines and DNA medicines. And we've been working with more than 30 companies worldwide to develop next generation vaccines, cancer treatments, and treatments for rare diseases. And so most recently, we actually just announced a deal on Monday with a great company in California, Biomanufacturing, to develop cures for rare genetic diseases that affect children. We're very excited about that. And also, we're also in this pandemic. We've been working with a large network of partners to develop a COVID-19 vaccine that's just entered phase 2 clinical trials. I think, we've from the biomanufacturing side of things, I can talk about today. We're embedded in a university environment with a company in a pandemic. We've worked very closely with academic-based, small-scale biomanufacturing facilities. Looking forward to working with many of our partners and to manufacture both vaccines and cures for rare diseases, and we'd certainly love if we have the opportunity to do that in Canada.
I'll now ask our final panelist, Jennifer Quizzi, to give us her introduction, please.
Hi, everyone. Thank you so much. Great to be here today. My name is Jennifer Quizzi. I'm coming to you with wearing two hats here, one with BioCanRx as the Director of Biotherapeutics Manufacturing Operations, but also in the capacity of the Director of the Biotherapeutics Manufacturing Center, the phase 1/2 clinical manufacturing facility located in Ottawa, Canada, that John was speaking about. I think the perspective that I'll be sharing with you today is as someone who is in the throes of trying to operate, a manufacturing facility during pandemic times, but also the challenges prior to COVID, but also from BioCanRx, talking about the success of working within a networking approach. It's something that we've been working towards on a number of our projects, particularly as they pertain to biomanufacturing initiatives, and is something that has been incredibly helpful and successful for us in achieving our goals and in bringing accessible cancer therapies to Canadians. As far as the Biotherapeutics Manufacturing Center is concerned, we've been manufacturing therapeutic viruses for the better part of 15 years at the Ottawa Hospital. These viruses, or these oncolytic viruses, have been used in phase 1, 2, and 3 clinical trials, both within Canada, the US, and elsewhere abroad. Recently, we have started manufacturing other therapeutic vectors, specifically for gene therapies. For instance, manufacturing lentivirus, which is used to make CAR T cells, which is a very important topic in the cancer landscape today. My background, I have a doctorate in cellular and molecular medicine. I'm Ottawa born and bred, and I like it very much here. There's a lot of opportunities happening in Ottawa. I participated, I've worked in industry for a bit, but came back to, I see my roots when it came to the research side of things, very much focused in cancer, virology, and understanding the underlying mechanisms, specifically initially why cancers spread to different locations. But again, the perspective I'd like to share is the importance of, teamwork approach to biomanufacturing across Canada, seeing that the benefits from BioCanRx's perspective and its biomanufacturing initiatives, the success that working together can really bring to this problem.
Thank you very much, Jennifer. And I'll just quickly introduce myself because I got to do that at the beginning. My name is Karima Sabar. I'm the CEO and partner at Quark Venture LP, which is a venture capital firm, a global firm that chose to headquarter in Vancouver, that invests in health technologies and health and biotech and medtech companies all over the world. And obviously, we pick what we think are the best ones. And I can tell you there are many best ones in Canada, which is why we chose to headquarter in Vancouver, Canada. I also wear another hat. I'm the chair of the Health Bioscience Economic Strategy Table, and so get involved in some of the policy work as well. So with that, I'm going to invite the entire panel to get us started with our first question. And actually, before I do that, can I tell the audience that please start putting your questions into the Q&A, and we'll start bringing your questions into the panel discussion as well. So just as soon as you're ready, just pop it into the Q&A and we'll be watching out for those. So let me start with a question for everybody on the panel, and maybe John Bell can kickstart us, but all of you need to weigh in on this one. Regarding the Canadian biomanufacturing ecosystem, what do you think that we are doing well in Canada? What do we excel in, and what are we doing well? And what has really been the pain point, the missing components, the barriers in enabling us to be able to achieve all the goals that the 2021 biomanufacturing strategy, which the government has put forward, can be enabled and executed?
Sure, I'll take a quick stab at that, Karima. I think in your opening remarks, you said it very well, that I'm very proud to be a Canadian scientist because we tend to really punch above our weight. We do really well in discovery. Lots of great innovations happen in universities and research institutes across the country. And I think that's something that we've gotten really good at. And, there's been some fantastic discoveries that have been made, fundamental discoveries that could lead to products. But where we've been missing is we haven't had the manufacturing capacity to really take those discoveries and translate them into products that can be tested in people. But I think it's an interesting. Your diagram at the beginning was very good because I think it explained that this is an ecosystem. We need lots of component parts to make it work. We've had some great successes. So the one which comes to mind would be Peter Cullis, a UBC professor, as an academic, made some fantastic discoveries that led to the formation of nanoparticles, which we've all heard about now in the news, in the mRNA vaccine, and his small startup company, Acutis, has really taken that and moved it forward. So that's a great example of what can happen if you have academic groups making innovations, taking them and translating them into products. And of course, John Lewis has done exactly that with his company as well. So I think there's some great things we're doing, but we're just not able to get them through to the clinic as fast as we need to in order to actually keep ahead of the competition, which is really fierce around the world.
Thank you. And anyone else want to jump in there?
Yeah, I'm happy to follow up John's comments. And John's absolutely right. I mean, I think in Canada we have a fantastic academic network. We do punch above our weight as far as discoveries, and there are some really fundamental discoveries that have been made in Canada. And often we've seen, a lot of the IP migrate to either U.S. or international companies to get developed fully. And I think this certainly needs to change. I think certainly in recent years we've been moving absolutely in the right direction. So funding is a key part of things, but biomanufacturing is another key part of things. We also do fantastic clinical trials in Canada. So being able to discover new therapies, manufacture those in Canada, and then apply them to clinical trials in Canada, I think would fill an important niche. Now we have several examples of clinical stage biomanufacturing. Ottawa is a great example. There's also a good one in Edmonton and several other places. But I think if we were to extend this network Canada-wide, we'd provide a key feeding system into these early stage companies, because I think what we really want to do in the end instead of producing the raw materials for life-saving medicines, we want to produce those life-saving medicines right here in Canada.
Absolutely. Lakshmi?
So if I might chime in, Karima, on that, I think I resonate with what both John and John have said. In fact, we did a scan very recently, and we were actually astounded because 4 years ago we did the same scan when we looked at the growth. So we have today in Canada about nearly more than 100 groups that are developing close to 300 plus biologic molecules. So this is the kind of richness and discovery platform and pipeline we have in Canada. And in fact, this number is quadrupled in just the last 4 years. So just again, emphasizes where we punch above our weight. And one of the things as well that has been quite good is the technology platforms. So I think the Acutus example is a great example of how we're very good in these technology platforms, which can be agnostically used towards multiple applications. I think John Lewis gave us the same example of his own platform from NTOS, where there's more intersectionality between different disease applications that the same platform can be used as. And John Bell has the same thing with his viral vector platforms. So we're really very good in both technology advancement and pipeline discovery of molecules. Where we have struggled, as has been said, is making sure we do the value creation and retain the value creation in Canada. And part of that can happen with the stickiness of biomanufacturing, because for biologic molecules, the process is the product. So if we were able to enable a stickiness in Canada, then we can really retain that value. So at the onset of the pandemic, NRC, our government research labs, which have very much been in the space of helping our companies grow and bridge that gap towards biomanufacturing, we often actually would get quite disappointed when that company has to move away from Canada, even though we have de-risked their manufacturing, because there is not that manufacturing capacity available to them. So during the wake of the pandemic, we recognized that, and we have started building this infrastructure. So we have, in fact, in 10 months, built the Biologics Manufacturing Center in Montreal, and we're going to complement it with a clinical trial manufacturing center. And not only that, we have started recognizing the need to enable across the country, as John said, for our cell therapy manufacturing, we think a distributed manufacturing will work much better. So we have to look at that aspect as well, not just at one center, but across the nation. So I think there is a lot of opportunity, and we have started pivoting towards that, to bringing together and de-risking, accelerating, and enabling manufacturing. Step is to sustain that and to enable that to get faster and more effectively to get those molecules towards a late stage phase 3 and beyond trials, and for them to translate into products that come out of Canada.
And if I could add to that, sorry, Karima. So I think the focus also needs to be accessible biomanufacturing. The reason why the BMC is even here is that there was a product that John and his collaborators had innovated, but couldn't afford to manufacture at a traditional sort of contract manufacturing organization. To your point, Lakshmi, especially with biologics, the processes, the product biologics are highly complex when compared to, let's say, compound-based therapies. And so, we're really looking for a very specific expertise. And really, it's outpriced for academics and perhaps even the startup community in Canada. And so really what we need to make sure that we're focusing on is that it's a spectrum of biomanufacturing that's required. There's biomanufacturing to treat, much like what the NRC model is, the clinical trial scale, manufacturing to commercial scale, but also looking for mechanisms to ensure that it's accessible to the various communities that really do play a very large part in providing impact to Canadians' biomanufacturing ecosystems. That includes academics and industry. So absolutely, it's something we do at the BMC. We look to enable those academic projects, but obviously it's looking as well to supporting the needs of our industry partners as well.
Yeah, and you all make very, very good points. But when you look at the barriers, why didn't we have more capacity before? Why hasn't there been investment in this? Why hasn't there been public or private investment to support biomanufacturing facilities and capabilities? Clearly, Canada has a huge strength in this area. So why hasn't that happened? Why do you think? Do you think it's because perhaps until recently, government has not been a partner to scale? Government has always been very good investing small amounts of money and kind of being catalytic, and has a lot of catalytic programs, as well. So you can do the early stuff. But when you have to scale up, you need a lot more money and a lot more capital. Do you think that's been part of the problem, or are there other barriers? I don't know who wants to
take that if you want, Karima.
Yes, go ahead.
Yeah, no, I think hit the nail on the head, in the sense is that I think there have been mechanisms to maybe enable early stage, discovery and maybe early stage de-risking, but maybe not a lot of the, public investments towards a national manufacturing, particularly to what Jennifer said in terms of affordable and accessible manufacturing. And we are starting to do that now, I think, through some very much a targeted way. So, for example, NRC with BioCanRx is working in this partnership to see for cell therapy, can we follow this model of manufacturing, which will bring forward more affordable and accessible kind of products to the clinical stage. And in fact, that model is being quite appreciated by international experts. But we had an advisory board meeting for our research center very recently, and our program that's doing the cell and gene therapy, and they said Canada needs to be applauded even to start thinking, but then it cannot stop with that early investment. We have to go the full mile in order to enable that public-private to retain that value in Canada. So I think with the investments the government is now making in the manufacturing installations across the nation, that opportunity is ripe. And I think the next phase of it will be to ensure that we have a coordinated mechanism in which we enable that public-private partnership for companies and for even early stage academic groups to be able to access this infrastructure, to be able to, de-risk their molecules, move ahead in the stream, and then ultimately to retain that value in Canada when those products advance to the next stage.
Right.
I think the other thing, if I could just jump in there quickly, is, Lakshmi said it earlier, in biotherapeutics, the process is the product. But the other part of that is the process is the people. And, we need to have people who can actually do this work. And although our government has invested in some facilities across the country, including our own here, we got a Canadian Foundation for Innovation grant to build our GMP facility. There's not money to train the people, at least it has not been in the past, and support those facilities. So that's another important part. What we've done here, which I'm very proud of, is we've managed to get enough business that we can become self-supporting ourselves now. But that's a real challenge. And I think as a country, we have to start to support the training of people at all levels of manufacturing so that we actually have the manpower that's going to be needed to make this all happen.
Yeah,
that's a great point, John. The only thing I would add to that as well is that it's in the title of this panel, ecosystem. So what Canada needs to do is feed and build this ecosystem, because at some point, and you've shown it, that there's a great model for it, John. Once you get to a certain size and you have that attractive capacity, it'll be self-sustaining. And again, if we can get to the point where we can build these companies where they want to stay anchored in Canada for the many reasons that they should, then they will attract other companies to the sector. And I think it's building that critical mass that's important. And I think government has a key role, can play a really key role in allowing Canadian companies to get to that point.
Yeah, and I go back to the question of the talent and the people, because the entire ecosystem is oiled by the talent. If we don't have the talent at every step, this engine isn't moving, right? And so reskilling, skilling, and having the right kind of programs. And this morning we had a session on that, of talent is critical. But I would also, like your comments on it, it's the scientific and specialized talent, but it's also the risk-taking entrepreneurs and the regulatory clinical people and the financing people, and it's talent at all levels. So why are we have such a shortage in Canada of talent? Every fifth or sixth person, if you go down to Silicon Valley or to Boston, Cambridge, is a Canadian. So why have we not been able to keep these very talented Canadians here in our own environments, do you think?
Well, maybe I can speak a little bit about the people that we need. I don't know that, I'm the best one to speak to keeping folks in Canada, but, the reality is a number of years back, this is pre-COVID, and trying to find the right sorts of people to work in a manufacturing facility. It was incredibly hard to find those sorts of people because the training programs, and I'm talking at every level, the traditional sorts of training that you would expect out of universities and colleges has not been moving along in lockstep with the sector. I mean, biomanufacturing is relatively, I'd say, in its infancy in Canada. We're hoping, obviously, to anchor it here and really grow it. But, truly, we don't have the formal programs in place to support folks getting the training they need to come into a facility like what we have in Ottawa and recognize what it is, and then at the same time, how to operate within there. And so for that reason, about 3-4 years ago now, we started a first of its kind program, which I'm very happy to say we're going to be expanding across the country, and it's called CanPrime. And CanPrime, the intention of this is to provide hands-on training to work within a GMP environment. Give the trainees the opportunity to learn what it is to work within a GMP ecosystem. And this is through marrying the complementary expertise that is found within our universities and colleges across the country, recognizing that there are different skill sets that come out of both institutions that lend themselves very nicely to working within these sorts of highly specialized environments. It has been running, as I mentioned, for the last almost 4 years, very successfully in Ottawa. And so this is why we're looking to scale it out to other sites across the country, specifically in line with Biomanufacturing's point of care manufacturing. So going back to what Lakshmi had been mentioning, distributive manufacturing for specialized cell products, recognizing that key to the sustainability of these facilities is going to be their ability to get the highly qualified personnel required to be doing the work, to be ones making the therapies that are going into people. So HQP, right now we don't really have, or highly qualified personnel, we don't really have perhaps as robust a pool of individuals to draw upon. But, through training programs like this, we're basically creating fit to purpose individuals who are ready to work in these sorts of environments, which has been very successful, I'd say, in Ottawa, to the point where we've had 15 folks run through this program, 5 cycle, and each of those 15 people have stayed on with us at the BMC and become full-time employees, which very much to our benefit. So really, we need to look at ways to build this training pool in Canada. To that point too, upskilling is going to be critical. We're not going to have enough students to meet the demand of some of the facilities that the federal government has been investing in the next, currently 5 and plus years. So really, we're looking at programs too that can offer that upskilling and reskilling component, absolutely, to make sure that we have the workforce required for the sector.
Right. Thank you. Okay, I'm going to shift just a little bit to the Government of Canada's biomanufacturing strategy that was released this year. It's a pivotal moment in history. I think a unique moment, recognition of that Canada has an opportunity to make up, frankly, for decades of lack of scaled investment in the life sciences, and to focus on this particular area. But let me ask the question, who will be championing this life science strategy, this biomanufacturing strategy, once the investments have been made, and who should be accountable in the successful execution of the government 2021 biomanufacturing strategy? How will they maneuver this to respond to the ever-changing environment, the new technologies? Today it's mRNA, tomorrow it'll be something else, and how will we stay relevant and current in building this sector, because we're putting our stake in the ground now around biomanufacturing. So who's accountable, both from government and from the community side? Who'd like to
That's
take
a great question. That's an awesome question. I'll throw out an idea. I think that, as you said in your remarks, Karima, we keep building and then rediscovering and then destroying again. I think, to the point that this has got to be an ecosystem. I don't think there's any debate about that now. We need to have all aspects covered. That sort of suggests you really need to have a network of people who are working together and are governed in some way. The NCE program, Network Centers of Excellence, which Biocanarax was founded on, was exactly that kind of network, where we have a governance which has people from patient representatives, industrial representatives, academics, and a lot of reviewers from outside the country helping us to see what we're doing. That kind of model sort of makes sense to me for this, because we've got a long ways to go. I mean, this bit of money that's gone out there is the beginning, and we really need to have people from all those different communities working together. So I would say, set up an organization, an agency, something like we had before with the NCE program, which has now been disbanded. Use that model to sort of get a governing body in place that has interests from all groups, so that you get the right feedback and are able to be nimble, as you suggest, Karima, to respond to changing technologies like mRNA, which seemed to come out of nowhere. Of course, it didn't. There's a lot of work behind that, but that appeared to be what happened, and it was because people were working on this, and we need to have that sort of network of people working on problems together that can then respond to these sorts of challenges. So I would think you can't just have government run it, because I don't think government's going to be able. You can't just have academics, and I think you can't have an industry. You have to have a group that works together, putting together to make this happen. Would be my opinion.
Yeah, it makes sense.
Building on that, Karima, I would say I agree with that. That I think what we would need with the type of strategy and all the investments that are going in is essentially coordination at 3 levels, in a way that is that the ecosystem is being looked at as one piece and coordinated at one piece, right? So you want to have some type of a governing body that looks at the infrastructure and the investments and ensures that there is, crosstalk, there is sharing of best practices, there is opportunity to have intersectionality when there is a need. So that's on the infrastructure side. The same type of governing body will need to have within the governance a mechanism of, tapping on experts that can advise on the type of innovative science that we will need to do in order to keep at the, the front end of biomanufacturing. The mRNA platform was very successful this time. Next time around, maybe that's something else. So we need to be always at the cutting edge of what's needed, and that can only come if we tap on experts and have that constant advisory role being provided to this ecosystem, and then the ecosystem responding with solutions to that advice, right? And then the last part of it, I think many have touched upon, is the training and ensuring that training occurs. Being in an intramural government lab, what we often used to notice is that even with a lot of our students that come out, even with graduate studies, that knowledge of how do you translate and de-risk from that bench science into the next stage, the aspects you talked about, Karima, on entrepreneurship and translational science, is not a lot that they easily learn during, say, their traditional graduate studies. So your training needs to include the entire spectrum. Yes, biomanufacturing training, but also training on the translational aspects of how do you manage IP, what do you need to keep in your business considerations, what are the type of collaborations and structures that are needed to enable that. So all of that has to be part of a training package, and I think the intramural labs can play a very important role in ensuring that they are part of this ecosystem to support some of that.
Right. John, did you want to say something, John Lewis? I saw you.
I did, yeah. It's almost all been said, but I would just say, I really like the way the conversation is going. I think as Canadians, we really need to look forward and not back. Obviously, we've made some missteps over the years, and we have an opportunity now to really build something that is long lasting. I think, biomanufacturing is not a simple thing either. There are many different platforms that require completely different systems, require different kinds of expertise and training, and different companies will be able to take advantage of those manufacturing platforms. So I think we need to think openly. I love this idea of collaboration between private sector, the public sector, and academia. I think that's what's really needed to provide a broad approach. And again, I'll reiterate what I said before. I think we have an opportunity here to build a system that can manufacture actual medicines. I think we've been good in the past at building raw materials for other things, and I think we really have the opportunity now to build biomanufacturing for final products that Canadians can use and then ship worldwide.
If I could just say one thing, I want to echo Lakshmi when you said coordination, whatever body that's going to be overseeing this, coordination is going to be key because, we're talking about a very large amount of money that's being made, investments to make sure that we're ready for another pandemic. And key to that is going to be ensuring that folks are working together. As we've mentioned a couple of times, biologics are so complex. So it's going to be critical that, we are technology transferring, working with one another, because it's not easy to mobilize quickly if we're working at cross purposes or siloing one another. There's a lot of, I think, benefit, to making sure that to be nimble, that we have functional redundancy. We focus in on our areas of expertise, but looking for that purposeful overlap. And building on the already very strong relationships, I think, that already exist in Canada between industry, academia, government. But absolutely, coordination is going to be key to that, to make sure that we're in a position to mobilize quickly when it's needed.
Absolutely. Now, this sort of everything you're all saying sort of leads me to think that, the worry is that the shift and the interest can change, according to the 4-year political cycles in terms of how important this sector is or not. And I think what's COVID has shown us is that, this is a health biosciences is a cornerstone and for Canadians, and is of national importance in the way that cybersecurity is, or in the way that digitizing the country is, or what have you, or even more so because there's an economic component to it, but there is the whole quality of life and the health impacts on Canadians component of it, and the rest of the world, frankly. So do you think that when you look at other countries who've had long-standing policies in, industrial policies that have embedded the life sciences in it, and I think, I'm obviously thinking specifically of the UK recently because they've done so many, but they have had a 10 or 20-year plan, and that's at the end of that, they have the sort of a robust, established life science and biotech sector. Do you think that we need to have something similar in Canada? And is this something that we collectively, when I say we, academics, the healthcare, the delivery side clinicians, the industry, and all the different, para agencies, government agencies should work together to try and have a policy that completely inculcates, science, healthcare, and the biosciences sector, and in particular, of course, biomanufacturing, because we've now put our stake in the ground around that.
Absolutely, and I think the important point you brought up, Karima, was that didn't happen in the UK overnight, and neither will we solve our problem here in 4 years. So it takes a coordinated effort. It takes commitment, and we have a lot of catching up to do. It's actually interesting. There's over 1,300 manufacturing facilities in the United States making FDA-approved products. The number in Canada is dwarfed by that number, and we're a smaller country in some respects, but not that much smaller. So I think we need to have a real, commitment to this problem. And as you say, what matters most to Canadians, aside from hockey, it's your health, right? So you really have to say, I want to see my health be maintained, and we have an opportunity to do that. The COVID thing's been a great knock on the head for us to show us how we're lagging behind the rest of the world in this respect. But 30,000 people unfortunately may die of COVID this year, but 200,000 people can die of cancer and heart disease, and those are diseases which biotherapies can work for. So we have to recognize that we've got the COVID pandemic, which is hopefully starting to end now, but we have a cancer, heart disease, other kind of disease pandemic that's ongoing, and so it behooves us as a nation to commit to solve these issues by making investments in science, industry, and these sorts of networks to make this all happen.
John, I love that point. I think, in my experience, I've developed several technologies that have come out of the educational and academic system. And I found in general, when we approach the health system to take them up, the first question we get is, where else is this used, or has this been used in any of the US yet? And I think we really need to leave that aside, right? I think we have a real opportunity here to be leaders in a number of areas as Canadians. And I think maybe it's hard sometimes for Canadians to think that way, but I think we absolutely do. We have, some really breakthrough, as John mentioned, cancer innovations, vaccine innovations, genetic medicines and biological medicines. And as Lakshmi mentioned, over 100, innovations in development for therapies. So I think, biomanufacturing is a key part of it. And as I mentioned earlier, financing is the other part of it. So if you can put enough of the pieces to puzzle together in Canada, you'll get, companies that arise out of academic institutions, with the right experienced and trained individuals to build those companies in Canada. And then we absolutely have the opportunity to lead in a number of these areas.
I think sorry.
No, go ahead, Lakshmi.
Thank you, Jennifer. I think, as you said, like if you take the UK model and many other countries too, it's investing for the long haul that I think we often don't do in Canada. We look at, a cycle of a few years and 3 years or 5 years. I think in this area of healthcare and, in biologic medicines, that road is much, much longer. So I think we need a bold vision, and my hope would be coming out of the life sciences and biomanufacturing strategy that the government of Canada is putting forth. The implementation will be based on a longer haul vision of, a decade of what we need to do, not 2 years of what we need to do, because then the cycle changes and then it's the flavor of the government and what can we do. So I think Canada needs a bold vision where we say we invest in this sector for the next decade, and this is a bold plan for that 10 years. And it does not matter what would change in the ecosystem, because we know that the platforms we are investing in, that the ecosystem we are investing in will have a direct impact on many health diseases. And I think this is, in my mind, is the most important for Canada to do, because we are a public healthcare system. It is ultimately going to translate into a reduced public healthcare costs. It's going to translate into better jobs for us, and it's going to translate into converting Canada into a knowledge-based economy. So I think we are at that cusp, and I hope that looking at what we did and looking forward, that Canadians will ask for that bold investment of a long haul in science and a vision for the many years to come, just not for a few years.
Yeah, and I was going to say, we're very much on the same wavelength, Lakshmi, because that was very much a similar point that I was going to make, but perhaps just looking in terms of the sustainability of the sector as well, right? These massive investments, the $2.2 billion that the federal government is putting in to support biomanufacturing, it's in response to COVID, which hopefully, fingers crossed, as John mentioned, we're on our way out of that. And of course, we want to be ready for the next pandemic, but hopefully we're not going to see that within our lifetime. what we need to make sure is that we're investing in sustaining this biomanufacturing infrastructure. And by doing that, it's making sure that we're manufacturing for other indications. That will make sure that we're in a state of readiness should we have to mobilize to make other vaccines in a sort of national effort to address another national issue or global issue like with COVID. And really, as John mentioned, these diseases, they've taken a back seat, right? Heart disease, cancer, a bit of a back seat over the last 18 months. There's going to be an influx of need that's already there that perhaps we're not seeing, and we need to make sure that we have the capacity to support new therapies to make sure that we're able to benefit the health and wellness of Canadians.
So you've all raised, an interesting point, because I think in the discussion we were having this morning, Dermot Keller, the Dean of Medicine at UBC, reminded us that when the UK did their strategy, the first chapter, which was, by the way, written by your namesake, John Bell, the other John Bell, had said that the game-changing thing for them when they turned the corner was when the academic community and industry started collaborating with the NHS system, with the healthcare system. That was the game changer when things started to turn around, because now suddenly you were doing innovations, but they weren't just falling by the wayside that nobody was adopting, which is kind of the situation in Canada. As you know, that our healthcare system is sort of one of the last to adopt any new innovations. And I can even give you the example of the Epsilon antibody that it wasn't available to us in BC, and it's a BC company, and then it was discovered there. So there's many such things, as you know, all over Canada, that we are not early adopters. We are laggards when it comes to adoption, and yet we are great innovators. So I think this relationship with the healthcare system, and of course our challenge is this federal provincial scenario that we have, where the healthcare delivery is with the provinces, but somehow there needs to be some alignment and collaboration where we are also early adopters of innovation. And we are looking, and of course, again, the Health Bioscience Economic Strategy Table report, HBEST as it's fondly known, was very clear in saying we needed to look at value-based procurement in our healthcare system and look at value-based healthcare system. So innovation and the biosciences and biomanufacturing, all of this is inextricably tied to healthcare delivery in this country. And we spend 50% of our GDP almost on delivering healthcare. It's a very big part of our economy. So what are your thoughts on, how do we bring this together and get all of the folks to come together around this, to realize how tied health and wealth are?
Yeah, that's a real easy one, Karima.
What do you do? Bang them on the head?
That is clearly the challenge, and I think it's going to be a while, because an ecosystem doesn't just pop up overnight, and so it is going to take engagement. But to your point, we're late adopters, and we also make ourselves dependent upon other people. So you've all heard about the high cost of new cancer therapeutics. Well, they're all made outside of our country by companies that are not Canadian companies, and so I firmly believe if we had our own ecosystem churning these things out, we could be able to create and manufacture and deliver things that suit our healthcare needs and our healthcare system, which means we need to engage with, as you say, the health delivery system as well. So we really need to get that whole thing together, and it isn't going to happen overnight, but I think there has to be a will to want to make this happen.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah,
John?
A part of this that we should probably address as well is, of course, we have all the ingredients, but creating these companies in Canada also creates wealth and creates jobs and increases the capacity of the economy. So, and if you look at the incredible investments in the therapeutics industry as a result of the pandemic. We've seen companies go from 10 people to now the largest companies in the world, and I think we have the opportunity. I think in Canada maybe we've been a little bit reticent in wanting to fund companies directly. I think with this new biotherapeutics manufacturing platform, I think we have the opportunity to make strategic investments, informed by multiple levels that can really feed this ecosystem and encourage it to grow over the years.
Okay.
And to answer the other question, Karima, you posed about, we're late adopters. I think that's a place where the government can actually play quite a important role from two perspectives. One is, I think, making sure that our regulatory system is at the front end of some of those, aspects of adopting new technologies. And we've got a very robust regulatory system, which is, from a scientific expertise, is really valued. So, and if we see one thing in COVID, I think that was a good example of COVID, where with the type of rolling submissions we had, we could accelerate the process of, actually having some early technologies being adopted, like the mRNA technology. The second piece of it is that for our companies, I think the procurement aspect, if the government will actually help and procure those products, then I think that's, value added, because you have a market in which they can actually move their product before they get out and go to the world. And again, in COVID, if we take a page from the COVID pandemic, we can see, because our vaccine procurements were done centrally and the provinces collaborated in this power of procurement, we were really good in the way we were able to get vaccines into the country. So can you imagine that if we actually adopted a similar principle for Canadian made in Canada type of medicines, where we have a collective power and the provinces and the federal government worked in unison, then I think we would be those early adopters rather than wait for individual provinces or individual regulatory type of oversight bodies and provincial healthcare system to wait to determine whether or not they should adopt a new medicine that's coming on the horizon.
Absolutely, Lakshmi. And this number 2 thing in the report was regulatory agility. And I have to say, you have to give kudos where it's due, that Health Canada did a fantastic job during COVID. So it shows that we can actually do it. And why can that not be systematized to all regulatory reviews and approvals? And I'm hoping, and I'm sure they will be looking at adopting some of those best practices from that experience. Jennifer, did you have something to say on this particular point?
I think my esteemed colleagues here have covered it very aptly. I mean, there has to be a good way of, being able to translate these innovations into something that can actually be a benefit to Canadians. And it's definitely going to take an ecosystem approach. So I'll leave it at that.
Thank you. So, the next question was somewhat tied to what we've been talking about, but I'll ask you anyway if you have anything else to add, otherwise we'll move on. How do we continue innovating and translating promising cutting-edge innovations toward commercialization in Canada and making it systematic and resilient? Who wants to? Excuse me.
I can start that one. I think, again, as I said before, we have the ingredients. I think we really, when it comes to being able to sort of bridge the valley of death, bringing a technology out of an academic center and turning it into a commercialized product, is investment. So, Canadians have done a much better job over the past few years at attracting investment and building their technologies in Canada. But I think when it comes to investment, I think, with the pandemic and with the rise of biotherapeutics, there's definitely a lot of funding out there. It's just a matter of making Canadian companies fundable. So we need examples in Canada that have been successful so we can show the world that we can do it in Canada, and that we have all the parts in place so that companies can be successful without having to go internationally to do biomanufacturing is a great example. So I think that investment can be catalyzed by government, and the government can help put parts of the ecosystem together to support that attractiveness. But again, we need to make these early Canadian companies a great bet for investment coming into Canada from outside.
Absolutely. And I can tell you as a venture capitalist, over the past few years, especially I would say the last maybe 3 or 4 years, there's been huge interest in Canadian technologies and Canadian companies. And when we are trying to syndicate and do bigger investments, larger investments, we've been able to bring into Canada sort of big venture funds, some of the biggest in the world, like Deerfield in health, to co-invest with us in Canadian companies. In the past, that would have been more difficult. There's a huge recognition of Canadian science and Canadian innovation. Any other comments from anybody else?
Well, just to say, I mean, we're all a little bit tiptoeing around what the real issue is, and there is just not enough money invested in Canada in science. I think that's the bottom line. We really have done really well, I think, despite the fact we haven't funded science very well. An example would be, and it goes to your question before about the brain drain to the south, Karima. In Boston, there's about a $1.8 billion invested from NIH grants in Boston. So, across our country, CIHR's budget's probably around $300 million for the entire country.
Yeah.
So if you just look at it from that perspective, the investment in science in the United States is huge, which brings in more companies, which brings in people who want to work in those companies, which then it just builds and builds and builds. And so I think we need to start taking this more seriously, because we shouldn't have to have a pandemic to know that science is what drives this country. And if we don't continue to fund it at all levels, not just fundamental science, but translational science, as Lakshmi talked about, biomanufacturing, all the way through, we're not going to be able to keep people here because there won't be the opportunity. So I think people like yourself, Karima, want to invest in people. That's what you really want to invest in. Yeah. So let's keep the people here by investing in them.
You're absolutely right. We have to, if we build and we nurture these companies, we feed them, we build them, and we get them anchored, getting investment will come. It will just be the bees will come. But we need to invest enough so that they're not struggling along the way. And it's a myth. People think, in the US it's all private sector money and government isn't. NIH and BARDA and DARPA and everybody is investing, gobloads of money in our sector. So we don't have equivalent funding, that's for sure. The scale of funding isn't there. And it's one of the things that we've certainly been saying, that the speed, scale, and scope of the funding needs to change. Government needs to, be a partner, and not only government, industry too, but government has to be the catalyst, to do this. So I think we're all kind of saying the same thing. Lakshmi, did you?
Yeah, no, so along the same thoughts, Karima. I think we have some good examples now of some companies starting to scale in Canada, right? You talked about Epsilon. There are a number of examples. We have Zymeworks, we have other companies in the Toronto area. So I think this is the time to capitalize and demonstrate. But these companies have done it, with a lot of struggle to capitalize. But we can't wait for this to happen in a second cycle and give them another long haul to happen organically. We have to be intentional, and I think that's where there is need for that public-private partnership and intentional investment to allow that scaling of those companies to occur in the Canada and the ecosystem. And then, as John says, if we do have those good jobs and very attractive sectors, then people will stay back. They will not go away. And then success breeds success, right? So I think this is the opportune moment to capitalize on the DARPA type model or the BARDA type model that Canada has always been, I think, a bit hesitant to consider. And I think this is perhaps a wake-up call for us.
Absolutely. Now we have a question around the new tri-agency fund and CFI funding announced in budget 2021, which is 750 million. Is this sufficient? How far will this take us? So it kind of goes to what Lakshmi's just been saying. Who wants to take this? I mean, the simple answer is no.
I didn't want to say it.
No, but you want to, well, there's no point dancing around it. But, if anyone want to add some color to that?
I think the answer is it is the seed and it's a start. But I think two things are going to be extremely important. It's that it's not just a one-time investment that we've done our job, checked the box and walked away. So we have to ensure there's a coordination around what's being funded, that we've spoken about the aspects there to build the ecosystem. And then the second is to look at the long haul. If this is seed funding, how is the sustainability going to be around these hubs of innovation that we will fund? And then the third point, I think John said, I mean, we have to make sure that, when you're looking at our funding agencies, it's not ad hoc funding for a short time, but actually a long-term sustainable funding.
Any other points on that? Another question from the audience is, where am I? Okay, your comment, John Lewis, following your comment about economic benefit of these investments, health is viewed as a line item cost to government budgets. How do we shift this view to that of an investment? What is the message that needs to be delivered to shift this viewpoint? Who wants to take this?
I'm not sure if I have a good answer for that, but I certainly, I think this is a super critical point. I think, we've seen during this pandemic, healthcare is essential for our health, for our security, and that, and COVID-19, despite its devastation, is only a small part of healthcare. We're looking to the rest of the world in Canada to create life-saving medicines and then negotiating for them. And I think if we absolutely have the intellectual capacity and the academic capacity to build a lot of them in Canada. I think building a biomanufacturing sector is a key part of it, and I think could serve as the linchpin to build this ecosystem. But it's true. I mean, these companies, to build an ecosystem too, you have to build well. So you have to build companies, take them public, build wealth in the shareholders and the investors that can then invest in the next new companies. This is exactly the reason why Silicon Valley and Boston are successful beyond the NIH funding, is that they've had successful companies go to the public markets and create wealth in the population that has then been able to seed these further companies. So I think this is what we need to strive for, and it's definitely not a bad thing. It's something that we should be really proud of.
I guess the other thing about changing the government's view of this a little bit is that, people who, I'll use the cancer example again. It's cancer's, a diagnosis is one of the leading causes of bankruptcy in Canada. People get terribly impacted by this. Many patients may survive their cancer but still not go back to work. So by investing in new therapies that work, that are less damaging, that are more effective, you're making an investment in your people so they can go back to work and contribute to society. So I think, as you say, Karima, rather than having this be, we're penalized by having to pay for healthcare, it should be, this is an important thing to do because we're going to make our whole population better, happier, and more productive. And so it really is an investment in the Canadian people.
Absolutely. Anything else from anybody? Okay, well, I'm going to ask Lakshmi this question, I think, to kick off. Given our healthcare research strength, we've already talked about this a little bit, but specifically, why haven't we been more successful in anchoring companies? And apart from some of the things we've already talked about, if there's anything else you want to add to that, will Canada's investments in biomanufacturing capacity result in a greater number of anchor companies, do you think?
So Karima, I think I go back to what I initially said, is that for most biological medicines, because the process is the product. So I think the very first aspect we need to ensure is that we anchor that stickiness to Canada in that manufacturing process. And in order to do that, I think we have to, ensure that going from discovery to manufacturing to clinical trials, that continuum is an ecosystem we've already built. And we have all of these individual components, right? So we've got a good clinical trial system, but we often are not looking at companion biomanufacturing that has to occur in order for that clinical trial to occur in Canada. So if we can actually tie those and make sure that they're both, supported in type of a partnership, that could be one way we anchor that stickiness of manufacturing in a Canadian system. And then going beyond that, going from a phase 1 trial to a larger scale phase 2 and phase 3, we need those scale-up capacities in Canada. And part of what I think we're doing at the NRC is looking at that space, both from the Biologics Manufacturing Center that we have just completed building, as well as the clinical trial, where we'll help that scale up to go into the phase 2, phase 3, because that's the other point, I think, exit point at which manufacturing moves away from Canada. So if we can try and keep that manufacturing in Canada as well, then I think we again, inculcate that intentional stickiness factor, and that will help, companies scale. And beyond that, of course, there needs to be the investment in those companies, and that will have to come in private public partnerships to take those risks that companies will need to take till they have an IPO or till they become public. They will need the investment and backup of the government in order to be able to de-risk and move. Otherwise, other investors outside will attract them, and they will be forced to, relocate their headquarters in order to be able to go to the next scale. So we have to, I think, look at it in those three aspects of, biomanufacturing, manufacturability, clinical trial companionship, and what scale-up investment those companies need to remain in Canada. And I think this could be definitely something an organization like NRC can help de-risk parts of that way.
Very good points. Very good points. And I guess, and that will also then anchor the people to stay as well, right? Because this is the big one.
I see. Really, sorry, just to add one more point. I mean, I think there's really two things that we can accomplish through this kind of strategy. One is I love the stickiness idea Lakshmi brings up. Being an entrepreneur in Canada or anywhere else is a very difficult task. And so the path of least resistance, I think, is often the path one takes. And so if all the tools that you need to build a successful company are available to you in Canada, then companies will naturally follow that path. I think the other part of it is building an ecosystem that people can see from outside, where they see everything is there in Canada, including the quality of life and the healthcare system and everything else, where I can build a company and raise a family and attract, have talent that's inbuilt to build, world-leading companies in Canada. So I think those two aspects we can accomplish by building this ecosystem.
And we're nice people, so we, no reason not to be here. Thank you, John Bell. You were going to say something too.
I was just going to slightly expand what Lakshmi said, explain what the stickiness factor is, and maybe John could comment on this. But if you are developing a product and you start to manufacture it in a particular facility and it's successful and it gets approved, you want to keep manufacturing in that same facility. You don't want to go anywhere else because it costs you a lot of money to go somewhere else, and you've got approval for the product produced in that plant. So that's why that's what makes it so sticky, is if you actually have a good functioning manufacturing system, then and you start your product there, then you're going to stay. You're not going to go anywhere else because it's not worth your investment.
No, you're right.
That's great. Yeah, that's a great point, John. Yeah, so I would say as well, the academic-based manufacturing centers, and Jennifer mentioned the staff that work on those. I mean, all of that is building expertise in making that specific product that can be continued in that facility or transferred to a facility down the road. But I think having all of that in one place and being able to do that is a flexibility that can really help to make good decisions.
No, it's huge. It's huge. Okay, Jennifer, I'm going to shoot this last one at you. Are we competitive on the international stage? So, what is our strength? And if not, what are we missing? I'll start with you, but everybody be prepared.
I think we're incredibly competitive as a nation is in the discovery. We've been, as John mentioned, hitting above our weight for a number of years. But again, there's been too many examples where we have developed an innovation, really good example. Some of the vaccines that we've developed, that has to go, and even, Glybera with the project the NRC is working on as well, and it's had to go outside of our borders to be translated. And that's really the piece, I think, that has been missing for a really long time, where we've had it at a very small scale, maybe not so much to the point where it has been obvious. And so, I really think that we need to continue to nurture our strengths in discovery, but then looking at that almost as an opportunity to leverage that strength as a justification for why we need that next bit, which is the translational part, the biomanufacturing, and maybe just to say, to point to the previous question with the stickiness, going the next part, the commercial scale or the scale up, right? Having both in Canada is critical, because again, it's another opportunity for us to get really good at translating at maybe an early phase clinical stage, but then having to go once again outside of our country for those products that are successful and make it to a commercial scale. So again, really good at the development. I'm hoping in the next 10 years with this targeted investment in biomanufacturing, we become a world leader in biomanufacturing, so that we can support these sorts of homegrown innovations and keep them in Canada.
Oops. Are we not?
Karima, did you get cut off?
I lost
Sorry.
out for a second.
Can you not hear me? Oh.
Now we can hear you.
Okay, that's weird. That's really weird. Sorry, John Lewis, do you want to go next?
Oh, I had a feeling you were looking at me. I love that the point about as we see these companies, if we can get anchor companies to grow and then provide opportunities for them to make their clinical trial material in Canada, and then provide opportunities for them to produce approved drugs in Canada. I think that's where the real win comes. And I can speak, with our technology specifically, it's similar to other technologies developed in Canada. It's a platform technology. It can be used for RNA, it can be used for DNA, it can be used for gene editing. And we're working with some 24 partners around the world. We would love, as we work with these partners, to bring new treatments through clinical trials, to be able to offer an option for them to manufacture, to be that manufacturer of their final approved drug. And I think, if we can get that anchor biomanufacturing commercial capacity in Canada, we can do that, and then obviously those treatments would be available to the Canadian population as well.
Excellent. Lakshmi?
Yeah, I think, looking at the question in a decade now, what I define as success is that if we're sitting around the same table and actually saying that, this time around, we did not have an issue and we have a national resilience to be ready when we have to manufacture something, and that procurement is not our only option, but we can also think about how do we manufacture our own drugs. So that would be, for me, a big mark of success. And in that same vein, I'd say we want to have affordable and accessible manufacturing for, some of those products where, for example, I think Jennifer mentioned Glybera, some of those products that, perhaps we cannot wait for somebody else to make a $3 million dose for our population. These are products our people need. These are rare diseases, and we know the science, we know the know-how, but we need to make them. So where do we make them? And if there was that, look back and say, hey, that's not a problem. We have 3 or 4 or 5 made in Canada rare disease medicines that we routinely make. And because of that, our population is served well. That would be a second mark of success. And then the third mark of success is that we have those anchor companies, and they are there not just in one hub in Canada, but in coast to coast in some of our major cities. We have major anchor companies, not just one but many, so that even if, say, the business strategy of one changes, we have many more to rely on, because that could happen. Some anchor companies can decide to be bought out or go away, but if we have kind of redundancy in the system, that will not affect us. So I think that's what I would define as success if this biomanufacturing strategy is implemented well.
Excellent. John Bell, last word to you on that.
Yeah, I think what I'd love to see is a really robust ecosystem. And, discovery is like a funnel. I know John Lewis has had lots of great ideas because I reviewed many of his grants, but not all of them have worked. And that's because this is what happens with discovery. So you need to have an early phase manufacturing industry, as it were. I think best done out of academia, just because of the training aspect and so on to it, that then bridges to the commercial manufacturing. You need all those things together. So if in a few years, in 10 years, maybe that was Lakshmi's timeline, if we had a robust early phase manufacturing, which allowed us to test multiple different products and refine and make them better, and then move those on to a really robust commercial organization that can then produce products for the world, that would be a tremendous achievement for us, I think. So I'd like to see that whole system grow together and be something that is complementary to each part.
So, if we were to look at what success looks like for each of us, and Lakshmi, you already started to talk about that. Maybe we can just go round the table again. And John, I might start with you, Mel, since we had you at the end. Just what would be your success regarding this biomanufacturing, capacity in Canada? What would make you happy?
I think probably I would parrot more or less what Lakshmi said. I would like to see a situation where we could do end-to-end discovery to manufacturing to clinical testing and then commercialization. And I think that's totally achievable in our country if we put some money into it. So I think we have lots of bright people making great things. You mentioned Accelera, Acutis, John's company, many other companies. Let's make a place where those people want to stay here and grow a knowledge-based economy, because I think that for me would be great to see Canadians' discoveries grown here and flourish here.
Yeah, and Accelera is just building a 1,000-person facility in Vancouver. We want to see lots more of those, right? And we want to see them across the country. Yeah. Lakshmi, back to you. Anything else you wanted to add to your list of success?
Yeah, I'd say that if I was to look back 10 years from now, I would, from my, lens and vision that I sit today, I would like to see that the intramural research that the government invests in is seamless with the research that's occurring in the academic sector and the industry, so that it's part of that ecosystem where we're all, pulling in the same direction, not necessarily working in our own silos. And I think if we can kind of achieve that, then the pieces that John talked about, from discovery to clinical manufacturing to the commercial manufacturing, can be enabled. So I would like to really see that, the linchpin of intramural research being critical in that.
Thank you. Jennifer?
Yeah, I think critical to success is going to be enabling that full spectrum like we've been talking about. And I think a key metric there, whether or not we're doing a good job, is the number of new, innovative, disruptive therapies for a variety of indications that are making their way into Canadian clinics. To me, that's the ultimate outcome there. We're all doing this because we want to make things better for Canadians. And so, I think that's definitely will be a hallmark of success. If we can show that because of these target investments, we have access to more affordable, innovative therapies for the benefit of Canadians, I think then we can tick that box that yes, this investment has been successful.
Excellent. Thank you, Jennifer. John Lewis?
So I'll just two things to close. I think, as I mentioned before, I would love. So I'm going to make a bold prediction. I think we've done a great job in the past of the biologics, making small molecules. Then there was the age of biologics. I think the pandemic has really shown us now we're in the age of genetic medicine. So I'm going to make the bold prediction that in 10 years from now, 30% of all the medicines we're going to take will be genetic medicines. I think, and we'll be making those in Canada. And I think the other thing I would really like to see, as someone who trains PhDs and also has companies, I would love to see every single one of my trainees working productively with their families in fantastic manufacturing jobs in Canada.
Wonderful, wonderful way to conclude with those remarks, and I think we're all in violent agreement. I just like to now we just got to get the people moving and shaking. I think what I would like to add to all of your comments is that the important thing, I think the message is that this entire ecosystem needs to be, as I said, nourished and nurtured. So it's not flavor of the day today is manufacturing, and then we stop investing in fundamental research and in translational research and all of those things. We have to have ongoing, one leads to another, and it's interdependent, and that's what's going to attract the capital to come in to support it. And so we have to be really strong in that message, I think, and I think I heard that from all of you as well. The other thing that I want to add is we didn't have enough time to talk too much about industry's involvement. When I talk about industry, I'm talking about large industry, also being a partner, because of course they are a strategic partner. And in the end, a lot of medicines, not all, but a lot are taken to market by them. All the work is done and the products are developed in biotech and what have you, but they have the deep pockets to do the marketing and the distribution of these things and the networks and so forth. So bringing them in early and having them in as strategic partners is also important, and for them to play a role. And the third thing I want to say, and really importantly, is to really have not just talk about alignment and collaboration between industry, academia, the clinical and healthcare delivery sector and government, but to actually do it and have it, and to have companies sitting on our campuses. Canadian companies should be having, plaster their logos, should be sitting on our campuses of our universities, and we should be working together hand in glove, and also then creating this pipeline of jobs for our talent and our kids graduating and coming out of universities, many of whom have to go to other parts of the country and other parts of the world to look for jobs that they want. So all of this can happen. I do believe that I think we've made a case for biomanufacturing being really central to this. Biomanufacturing capacity and strength in Canada will enable this to go in that direction. So with those comments, I'd like to end our session. Unless any of you have anything else to say, we still have a minute and a half. So, if anybody's going to say something, say it, please. If not, I want to thank you all very much. It was a great conversation with all of you. Certainly for me, I was honored to do that. And I hope our audience has enjoyed it as much as I have. Thank you, everybody. Bye-bye.